What's going on, animators? Aaron here from CG Riff, and we're thrilled to have you joining us for episode number 18 of the CG Riff Animation Podcast. And you all are in for a great treat tonight. Our special guest tonight is Mr. Steve Meyer. Steve's coming to us most recently, was the head of character animation over at the third floor on the recently released Predator Killer of Killers. It's streaming now on Hulu. Check it out. It's really awesome. We're going to talk about that later. But before that, Steve was at Fortiche for a while, spent a long time at Dreamworks, have been at DNEG, Disney Feature, all over the place. And we'll get into all of that. We'll let him give you his backstory and get you all caught up. But we're so excited to have you here tonight, Steve. Excited to get into it with you. Welcome.
Man, thank you so much, Aaron. I'm super excited to do this with you. It's great to meet you, man.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear about your journey, and I'm sure it's going to inspire all of our listeners. So, let's get right down to it. We usually like to start at the very beginning. Take us, well, not the very beginning, dark and stormy night. Dad had a twinkle in his eye. No, not that far back, but tell us, where did you grow up? What role did art and/or animation play in your, kind of upbringing, and how did you find your way into animation as a career?
All right, let's do it. Grew up in the Midwest in Missouri. Grew up in the 80s. And I think for me, just kind of coming from middle-class family, nobody in my family drew. So I don't know where I got the bug. I don't know. Nobody in my family went into the entertainment business. So I don't know where I got the bug, but I've been drawing since I was a little kid. And as far as animation goes, it was always TV animation for me. I watched a lot of TV in the 80s, man.
Yeah.
the best 80s cartoons, they were the best. So Thundercats and DuckTales and Gummy Bears and Captain Caveman, all the good stuff, right? But actually, it's funny. A longtime friend of mine that I used to draw comics with told me when I went to Disney, he goes, "You're the only guy I know that when we were 10 years old watching DuckTales, you go, I'm gonna make that one day," and you actually did it. Nice. So I was like, I don't remember saying that. That's weird. It wasn't like I was a one-track mind, but somehow I pulled that off, and he remembered it. So it was pretty cool. But yeah, that's pretty much the role of art and animation in my life. I always drew, and I think the idea of bringing my drawings to life or bringing the characters that I'd create to life really appealed to me, So that's kind of how I think found my way here. Yeah. I'm trying to think if I should be more specific than that, or if that,
No, so I guess from there, like in terms of education or training, like what were sort of your steps into the industry? Did you study somewhere? Or you kind of self-taught, or like what was that
right
part like for you?
Okay, great. Yeah. I would consider myself self-taught. I did go to university, but I went there for film and fine art. So it wasn't really studio art oriented. It was more, like a triangle on a canvas, and you have to talk about like why it means something. I don't know, but it was still, we still did figure drawing and stuff. But I really got into the filmmaking side of things, and they did have 2 animation classes, but they were more teaching the process of animation. So we learned how to like record audio on tape and then run it through a gang synchronizer and like mark your and then do a dope sheet, like old school stuff. And then we learned the downshooter. We learned how to paint cells. So it was more about like the process of creating animation and not like not the principles, or the fundamentals. That would be Dick Williams' Survival Guide. So I'm self-taught, yeah. but supplemented heavily by Mr. Williams. And what my university did was it really wet my beak, and I was like, I dig animation and I want to do this, but I was never really a good enough draftsman. And then I graduated, and I followed my then girlfriend, who was from California. I just followed her out to California. We stayed together. And when I arrived in San Diego, she actually found like a 3D animation training center. It was like, they literally called it a training center. But again, it was software. It wasn't the principles. And so in 8 months, I learned Maya and Softimage, both packages in 8 months. And you learned everything from modeling to rigging to, moving something around. So it wasn't about animation, but it did sort of open up an avenue of like, I think I can do this. And I was kind of focused on, I could probably get into video games then. Like I think my mind was like, I can do a cycle. Like I can do a believable cycle. Anyway, I got out of that school and eventually cobbled together a really terrible short film about a caveman trying to keep warm. And I sent it to a couple of headhunters, and one of them like wrote back, and she chastised me right away. She's like, people don't care if you can make a short film. They don't want to, your employers don't want to have to work to see whether you can animate or not. She goes, just do cycles. And I was like, okay. And I did a bunch of cycles really quick. Again, Dick Williams' book. I'm like, okay, here's the sneak, here's the run, here's the sad walk, like the gamut, like whatever you need, I can animate this. And it was actually at that time that one of my upstairs neighbors, I found out he was a Midway Games animator in San Diego. And I bumped into him coincidentally in the parking lot one day, and I offered to buy him Taco Bell if he would look at my work and give me feedback. And so he did, and I remember he watched like about 10 seconds of I had put it on a CD-ROM at the time, and he popped it in, and he stopped and he goes, dude, I wouldn't hire you already. And I was like, oh, and I was like, why? And he proceeded to give me a critique, which was like the first time I had ever gotten that on animation. And I was like, kind of like tunnel vision, and but I was like and I was writing it down with a shaky hand, and I ran back down to my apartment, and that night I did all of his notes, and the next day I was like knocking on his door with more Taco Bell. I was like, more Taco Bell, and he was blown away. He was like, you hit this is like a huge improvement. And there was something that clicked in my brain in that moment about like the power of critique. And then it's not one-sided. Like the fact that I listened and I did it, he was instantly like, dude, come back, show me your stuff anytime. And I was like, oh, I understand how this works. I understand how I can get better at this, And anyway, I got those cycles done. I sent out about 40 demos, and I got one interview because at the time, nobody wanted to take a chance on anybody with no experience. This was a long time ago. This was like 2001. It was pre-animation mentor, pre-YouTube, anything, right? And so my demos were on VHS, and I packaged them up all pretty. And anyway, 40 demos, one interview, but luckily I got it. I got the gig. They were just desperate enough to give me a chance, and that was on Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow. So way back in the day, and that movie changed everything for me because we wore so many hats. It was a tiny little ragtag group of people that were making this in Van Nuys, California, and we rigged and we animated, we did effects, and it was kind of whatever needed to be done, you figured it out. And the people that were in charge of that were the greatest mentors, like Steve Yamamoto. It was like getting paid to go to school, and that's where I really learned to animate. So long story short, did you learn to animate? No, I'm self-taught up to that point, but it was bad. And they gave me a chance, and that's where I really learned principles, weight and timing, and I learned work ethic, how to apply yourself and focus and all this stuff. I totally attribute all that to Mr. Steve Yamamoto. He's the man.
Wow, awesome. That's great. I'm glad that you got your shot. You got your foot in the door. Sometimes that's all it takes. That one place to take a chance on you, and then once you're in there, the room for learning and growth, especially starting, from basically nothing. There's really a lot of great growth potential, which is great. So that's a good story. I like that.
It's so true, awesome. Man. It's so true. They always say like the first one's the hardest to get. And when I was in the first one, I was like, oh, there's no way. The next one's going to be just as hard, but it's not, because you apply yourself, you kick ass for the people. They don't have to get upset, and then they want to continue to work with you. It's like really that basic, for the most part. And that's been how the career's been ever since. I keep trying not to, upset my bosses, and I keep getting jobs. So I'm not going to change that anytime soon.
Awesome. Yeah. So when did you, I guess, make your way more into feature animation? So you started out, I guess, more like visual effects side of things, right? You guys were working with plates and all that, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah.
Was it all hand keyed, or
Well, it's sort of plates. So what we did on Sky Captain, we did previs to final. So we actually previs everything. And then they went to London at some point, and they shot it based on our previs. And then when it came back, that's when we animated the robots and everything. But a lot of it was all CG. The only time we had to use plates was when there were live action people in there, because everything else was CG. It was actually the first movie that did that. A lot of people think it's Sin City. No, man, we were the first ones. Sin City was like more high profile. But Sky Captain was the trendsetter, and it was crazy to be a part of that. Like I said, it was like revolutionary, but it was just a bunch of no experienced kids like me, trying just like, oh my God, I can't believe I get to do this every day. And then the grandfathers at the top, like this looks terrible. Why would you do it like this? But again, like, but in a kind way, like tough love, it taught me to, like, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, Aaron, but like, you'll be looking at a shot and you're like, yeah, this looks pretty good. On Sky Captain, you'd get to a point and then you'd call. There was a little phone in our little animation area, and we'd be like, hey, Steve, I'm ready to show you. And I was like, this is looking good. He's going to like this. I would believe that right up until the point where I'd hear him walk up and stand behind me and look. Then I'd see everything that was wrong with it.
No.
And I don't know how that always happened, but it was like, that job taught me that osmosis to see through other people's eyes. Do you ever experience that, Aaron?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Where you're like, and then all of a sudden you're doubting it. You're like, wait, oh no, yeah, come back in 10 minutes.
Exactly.
Fix one more thing.
And right up before that moment, it was like, yeah, this is gonna be good. He's gonna like this a lot. But yeah, that I definitely. That's the first time that ever happened to me, not the last. But I got sidetracked. How did I get into feature? Right. So the guys that ran that, Steve and another mentor, Rob Dressel, those were all ex-DreamQuest guys, which DreamQuest was absorbed by Disney. So they did movies like Kangaroo Jack, and they were a part of Dinosaur, and a lot of those early Disney movies that were not feature animated, but like when they sort of absorbed the visual effects. And so when that ended, Sky Captain was built to make the movie and then completely dismantled. Literally, the building was torn down.
Wow.
It was made to make that one film, and then it ended. We stayed together as a small group for a little while called Unit 11. We went to work on a pitch for John Carter of Mars before Andrew Stanton did it. It was in the hands of the director of Sky Captain. So we kind of stayed together for a little while, but then that fell through because Paramount changed leadership and they just scorched everything that was in production. And it was at that time that Circle 7 was hiring for Toy Story 3. That's a steamy story, but but I was like, okay. And all of my colleagues were like, we can get you an interview there. And so they set me up with an interview. That's a funny story too, but I think I'll try to stay on track. But that didn't work out, and Toy Story 3 never got made by Circle 7. But it was through that Anthony Molinara, who was the head of animation on that while I was in production, he said they're looking for assistant animators over at Disney Feature. Would you consider doing that? And I was like, yeah. Even though I was an animator, technically, I was like, the opportunity to get into Disney as an assistant. And what it was on Meet the Robinsons, they had no sim software on Meet the Robinsons. It was all hand keyed. That was the sort of stylistic choice for that movie. And so I was a part of like 4 people that we were the team tertiary. We did all the sleeves and hair. So an animator would finish and they'd call me up and they'd go, Steve, are you open for a shot? I'm like, yeah, send it on. And they would send me their shot and I would animate the sleeves like overlapping and the hair overlapping.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that.
Wow. To this day, man, secondary animation, I just like click my brain off and I can knock it out like so fast. I was hand keying Predator dreads on the initial tests before we had a sim system. I was like, I'll hand key like 30 dreads, no problem, because it's just in me now after that time on Meet the Robinsons. But what was cool about that wasn't just that I was working at Disney, it was that after hours I got to use their rigs and do animation tests. And I had never animated like that before. And Sky Captain, it was all make it look real, make it look real, make it look real.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, I'm on a cartoony movie. What is this? So it was a whole new flavor. And I had this wealth of awesome animators to look at my stuff and, slap me around and be like, what are you thinking? Move. Let me show you this trick. And let me show you that trick. And I just absorbed everything. And I was fortunate enough at the end of Meet the Robinsons, they had just started up their animation apprentice program again after like a number of years. And I applied to that with like 9 other people, and I actually got in based on my tests that I had been doing in my nights
nice.
While doing sleeves and hair for Meet the Robinsons. So I got into that apprentice program, and my mentor was Dale Bear, the late great Dale Bear.
Oh, awesome!
Just a gem of a human, and so I spent, I think it was like 4 or 5 months in that program, and then if you did it right, you got out and you got hired as an animator. And luckily I did it right. So I got on Bolt after that. And that was my transition into feature. And I think at that time, it was like not easy to do, because if you were a VFX guy, feature was like, no, you're not a performer. You're not an actor. And it's still sort of true, but I think it's less true because lines have blurred over the decades,
Yeah, that's true.
But then I found a loophole. I was like, I'll do sleeves and hair for a year and a half, and then I was able to get it
Yeah.
in.
It's that
So
same thing. It's like foot in the door, like makes a big difference. Like once you're in there, you can, if you put in the time, obviously, and the after hours, you're able to make that happen. So that's really great.
totally, man.
Yeah, I actually, my senior year at SCAD, they took a group of us out to LA, to visit Disney, to visit a bunch of studios, but we went to the Disney feature and they were just finishing up Chicken Little.
Oh, wow.
They had showed us some like early, some concept stuff for Meet the Robinsons. I think it was still like a day with Wilbur Robinson at the time.
Yeah.
And then American Dog or whatever was turned into Ball. Yeah. So I remember seeing all that concept art and stuff, and just like a wide-eyed college student about to graduate, being like, "Oh, this place is awesome!" Like,
that is cool. Awesome that you know that, man. So when it was American Dog, we had access to those rigs, totally different designs than when it became Bolt, right? And some of those early tests I did with those American Dog rigs. So
awesome.
Those never saw the light of day, but I have like old animation tests.
That's so cool.
They're not good, but they're with those original Chris Sanders characters, which were like so appealing, man.
Cool.
But yeah, that's neat that you know
awesome.
that. That's so cool.
Yeah, that was it was awesome. Like they selected like 12 of us to go out there for like 2 weeks, and we just like toured around all the studios, and it was a really, really fun time. All right, cool. So so now you're in feature. How long did you end up staying at Disney? Were you just there for both, or did you stay there for a bit?
So I was there from Meet the Robinsons, and then did a short film called Glago's Guest, and then on Bolt did that, and then I got cast on Tangled. But this is the tricky part, right? My wife and I were expecting our first child, and there was a layoff right after Bolt, and I was fortunate enough to get kept. I was like so thrilled, but I was making nothing, and now I had a baby on the way because I had been there about a little over 3 years at that time, and I went in like all meek to the HR person, and I was like, so I'm wondering, would we get a pay increase? And she was like, they just had a layoff. You should be really happy you have a job. And I was like, I am. Thank you, ma'am. And I ran back to my desk, and it wasn't long after that my former boss from Sky Captain called me, and he asked me to come work for him doing previs again for Jerry Bruckheimer films, and he offered me a good salary bump, and I took it because I'm like, I'm an adult now. I have a baby on the way, and so I took it. And it was great. It was great working for him. However, like I had gotten a taste of animation, man, of finishing animation, and Bolt is good. The level on Bolt really like kind of went up from Meet the Robinsons to Bolt. It kind of got naturalism kind of started to take hold. It was very influenced by what was happening at Pixar at that time, and so I got a taste of that, and I really liked it. And then I went back to previs, and it didn't do it for me. So I ended up working for him for about 10 months. I finished the project that he brought me on, but I was already like, I got to get back. I got to get back, because you get a taste of something. And I ended up applying at Dreamworks, and I got hired at Dreamworks. So it was 10 months of previs on Sorcerer's Apprentice and Prince of Persia. And then after that, I got hired at Dreamworks, and that was for Dragons 1. And that was right when my baby was born. So if you do the math there, like we were pregnant and it was happening, and then she was born, and the next month I started on How to Train Your Dragon 1. So
nice.
It was a crazy time, but that's
sounds like it. But
it's one of my favorite films to this day, though, because I think I was going through so many changes, being a new dad, and then being at this new company that was like a utopia. Dreamworks was and still is, I think, a utopia. And the talent there, I'm like with James Baxter and Christoph Sarand and Simon Otto, and it was overwhelming, but they didn't make it feel like I didn't belong there. You know what I mean? I think Simon was a really great hookup because he kept the challenge at a level of like, now we're going to push you here, now we're going to push you there, now we're going to push you there, but I never felt like I was drowning having a new baby at home. But I mean, I was stretched thin, but those kinds of times in your life, I think you do achieve like the most growth, and you always look back fondly on that, like, wow, like every day I was just firing on all cylinders, and so to this day, that's still one of my favorite projects that I've ever been a part of. And
awesome.
I think because it was so positive, 10 years, I stayed there for 10 years,
Wow. Okay.
Until Dragons 3, actually, I bookmarked.
Oh, so you came full circle, kind of. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
No, so one thing I wanted to mention is I didn't realize that kind of your earliest positions, and a couple of times after that, you were working in previs. I didn't realize that. Even from the Sky Captain stuff. And so, what part of your kind of film education, right? influenced that? Like, I guess, if you're doing film school where you're like really familiar with like cameras and lenses and all that type of stuff, like more so than a lot of animators tend to be.
I think like cinematic language, probably,
Yeah.
like the way things cut. Yeah. Like lenses, we didn't have fancy stuff in school. So, when I was on Sky Captain, it was like a set number of lenses, but you really learned why you use certain things. Like you really learn why you use a long lens to compress things, or why you use a wide angle, or why you boom versus pan, So it was like learning the cinematic language.
Yeah.
I think the schooling really helped with that. It helped me be useful to Steve on Sky Captain. You know what I mean? Where I wasn't just like, well, I animate characters and that's all I do. You know what I mean? I was willing to be like, no, I know that. And my first pass on a scene wouldn't be terrible. It still required a lot of push, but I think you're right. That's a great observation. I actually never thought about that, about how that probably led to Sky Captain. That's why I went back and did previs. But yeah, at the end of the day, being the cameraman versus being the character in front of the camera, for me, there's no contest. I really love performing the character,
Yeah.
So,
yeah. But I mean, it's definitely a useful skill to understand. I just did a lecture last night on cinematography, and I don't understand it to any high level because we didn't really cover it a lot in art school, in animation, major. But just kind of teaching my students to think about how we're composing things in the frame and all of that, and how you use that to elevate the storytelling and all that, is really useful. So having that background and kind of infusing that, and of course now you've kind of come full circle again to a place whose DNA is previs, right?
Totally, man.
Yeah, and that's really, really cool. So all right, so we're I think mostly we're getting caught up, right? So you did 10 years at DreamWorks to Dragons 3, and then what was next for you? Was it DNEG, or where was the transition out there?
So 10 years, right? And I should say that like I had my first baby 1 month before I started, and we ended up having 2 more kids through that duration. So I was thrilled to just be an animator that whole time. Like I had every 2 years my life would get turned upside down again, right? And so I was thrilled to have a job and to be learning every day and being pushed by super, super strong soups and okas. So I never really had ambition to like push higher. But by the time I did, DreamWorks was going through a bit of a flux where like certain projects got canceled and there wasn't a lot of upward mobility. So by the 10-year mark, I think I was really itching for something different. I mean, I was an animator there for 10 years, just an animator, not a supervising animator or anything. And it was never easy. I don't want to say animation is easy, but I think after doing it, and then also I should say the great thing about DreamWorks is they change it up on you. From movie to movie, they change it up. So you're like, I got this naturalism thing. This is easy. And then they're like, boom, trolls, and you're like, oh my God, what am I doing? So I think that change up kept it fresh for a really long time. But eventually I did want to try something else. And a lot of us felt, because the software was so good and they got free lunch and the mentors are so great, that you're like Brooks in Shawshank Redemption. You're like, can I survive on the outside? And there's always that question, like, can I survive without this software and without my beautiful Cintiq? So basically at the 10-year mark, a good friend of mine had moved back to England. Tim Watts. I don't know if you've heard of Tim Watts. He's a extraordinary artist and British gentleman. And we were having the final coffee with him, and he was like, if you ever want to come to England, you've got a job or whatever. And so I went home to my wife that night, and I was just joking around. I was like, hey, you want to move to England? And I feel like before I finished the sentence, she was like, yes.
And I had 2 suitcases. When do we leave?
It felt like that, man. And I was like, oh, what? Wait, because I was teaching at Art Center at that time. I was mid-contract. Like I was in no position to go. And then I had to be like, I was just kidding. I'm sorry, honey. But what that did is that planted the seed that kept growing. And then that's when around the 10-year mark, he was at DNEG and he called me up and he said, we're doing their first maiden feature film. Like DNEG's been a visual effects titan, right, for 20 years. They wanted to get their piece of the feature film market. And so they started a feature division and they were doing a film. At the time, they were doing planes. And he goes, and Tom Jacob was a producer there, who was producer on Puss in Boots, a wonderful, wonderful gentleman. And so I met with Tom and talked it over, and I was like, oh my God, are we going to do this? We're going to up and move across the pond post 40. Nobody moves post 40, Aaron. Like you're like settled, you got kids. But I'm like, I think we're going to do this. This is crazy. And we did it. And the day we arrived in England, we were in this like sort of hotel right in the interim before we found a place to live, and my phone is lighting up from all my friends back at Disney, and they're like, dude, are you okay? I heard the news. Dude, I'm so sorry. What's going on, man? And I was like, what's happening? And so I called DNEG and I go, I'm getting some concerning texts from the people at Disney, because I went there to work on Planes. It was like a Planes movie. And anyway, they're like, yes, so they've canceled the Planes movie. They've canceled a lot of stuff. Some stuff happened, but don't worry, we have another movie we're going to slot right in its place.
Wow.
Because I had just arrived. Like, we had just moved to England, and the movie I was there to work on got canceled. And that movie was Ron's Gone Wrong. So a very different film, very different complexity. I have to tell you a funny story. I was hemming and hawing. I was like, should I do this? Is it going to be too much? And I talked to an old friend, Mike Stern, who was at Disney, who ended up going up to Pixar, and he had been at Pixar for a number of years. And I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know if I should do it. I don't know. And he goes, dude, Planes. He goes, after animating dragons, that's going to be a total vacation for you. He goes, you can just travel around Europe and you're going to knock out footage. It's going to be so easy. And I was like, that's a good point, man. Okay, I'm going to do it, because I was like, it's going to be simple. And then Ron's Gone Wrong was not simple. So it was a real challenge, but I'm proud of it. I feel like we did what we could for a first. There's always kinks, on that first maiden feature for any company.
So I'm noticing a trend, or like looking forward to a trend. You're like the guy they bring in when they want to make their first feature, I guess, right?
I noticed that trend too.
So were you in? So you mentioned, I guess the whole time at DreamWorks you were fine just being an animator. Yes. So you were brought in at DNEG as a soup, or what in leadership?
Supervising animator, not a Hoka. Supervising animator.
Okay.
I didn't want to leave. I mean, you can tell, right? I take a long time with things, even telling stories. I like to know that I've got it before I move to the next level. And so I just wanted to move one level up. Now, that said, Aaron, there was no Hoka for up until 1 month before we started quota. So all of the Hoka duties I actually did. I worked with the rigging department to bring the rigs up to a level. I was in design meetings. I was recruiting. I was in all the interviews for all the animators. So I got a taste of what it would be like to do that. But I wasn't technically that, So then once production started, I went to just managing my team. But I also led Ron. He was my character, the little robot guy, the main guy. And then the grandmother character was also, because I was like, well, Ron's cool. He's the title character, but I want a human too. I want to do a human. So luckily enough, there were enough to go around, because the ensemble cast in that movie is gigantic. But yeah. So that's how that went down.
Okay, awesome. And so how did your family and everyone adjusted to being in a whole new country across,
oh my gosh,
moving across the world?
They love it. They loved it. They miss it a lot. We're back in the States now. They really missed it. We made amazing friends over there, and we didn't just stay in England. So what happened is Ron's Gone Wrong ended, and I was kind of ready to come back. I'm kind of I like it in this room, this quiet room. It was a big change for me, and I embraced it, and we did it, but I was ready to. I was like, okay, 2.5 years, time to go home, kids. And my wife was like, I don't want to leave Europe yet. And I was like, oh gosh. So I ended up trying other companies. Nobody was really hiring at the time. And I called like Illumination, and Mikros was still a thing then. And I remember talking to them. Everybody was interested, but nobody was hiring at the time. And then at that point, I called my buddy Alexi. He's a colleague, an old friend, Alexi Waineroy, from DreamWorks. We hit it off. We did a bunch of silly, stupid short films together. So I really love Alexi. And I knew he was in Europe. And I'm like, hey, man. Oh, and actually, I'm missing this. He came over to Ron's Gone Wrong for a few months to help during our development period. So it was amazing to be back with my old friend. And then he left and he went to France. And I didn't know what he'd been doing. So I call him up and I'm like, hey man, so Ron's Gone Wrong is done, and I'm kind of ready to get out of London, and my wife doesn't want to leave Europe yet, and I said, but a lot of places aren't hiring. Can you think of anything else since you've been here? Is there any place I'm not thinking of? And he goes, would you come work with me? And I was like, what are you doing? And when he showed me what he was doing, I got this like swell of excitement that I it's just, you get that once in a while in this field when you realize you're going to be on a project, or you have the chance to be on a project, and like every cell in your body is like gyrating, you know what I mean? And that's how I felt, because we got on a video call and he showed me not just the designs and not just some of the animation they'd been doing, but he showed me he showed me the rigs, he showed me the libraries, and I was like so excited, man. And so of course I accepted. And what he did was he had started setting up a remote branch. So Fortiche is based in Paris.
Oh, yeah.
And because they took on 2 seasons, they grew too fast, and they basically were busting out of the building that they were in.
Oh, okay.
And so they were faced with like a certain choice. One, they could outsource, and they were like, we don't want to do this because the style is so specific that we want to keep it in the family, basically. So the other thing they decided to do to cut down costs was they had 2 remote branches, and Alexis headed up one in Montpellier, South France, and Remy Thoreau headed up the other one that is in Canary Islands in Spain.
Okay.
So those 2 guys did that. I came down with Alexi and I helped him. I mean, he had already established it. He'll say I helped him establish it. He's too nice. Like, I just kind of came in and like led the team and cheered everybody on. But it was an amazing experience, man. And it really, I liked animation. I liked it a lot. When I started on that show, working with Alexi, working with the team, I loved it. And I told him this when I left. I was like, you guys helped me fall in love with animation more than I actually thought was possible. And I'm going to cheer up. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, man, it was a magical experience. And it's I talked to a lot of people that were a part of it. One of my leads on Killer of Killers came from the Canary Islands. I never knew him, but I was lucky enough to get him as a lead afterwards on Killer of Killers. And he was like, yeah, Arcane is like a once in a lifetime kind of, and you have to tell yourself that, because if your expectation is that it's always going to be that, you're going to be disappointed, because everybody was firing, man, on all cylinders.
Yeah, I mean, and it really shows on the screen. And I haven't talked to a ton of people who worked on it, but I'm glad to hear, because sometimes you see projects and they're amazing and everybody loves them, but then you hear about behind the scenes and it's not that. But that's awesome to hear that the making of it was that enjoyable to you all, and then it shows on the screen. It's just incredible what you guys were able to do. So did you have like, are you a gamer? Did you have a background in League of Legends where you're like already familiar with that world, or was it all pretty new to you?
Not even a little. And it's funny because I remember when I lived in LA, friends would go to work for Riot, and they're like, you got to do your time every day. The producers come around and go, have you played League? Have you played your 45 minutes of League? And I was like, as a guy with kids, I was like, oh, geez, I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if I could play 45 minutes of video games. The kids will they need me, right? And so, but for Arcane, it wasn't part of the regiment, you know? So a lot of the young, we had a pretty young crew. A lot of them, it was their first job out of school. But man, they were so talented. And a lot of them played. This one girl was like, she was French. She goes, I've spent $4,000 on League of Legends of my mother's money. And I was like, your mom let you spend $4,000 on like skins and stuff? That's crazy. And she's so talented. She's so talented. She's going to pay her mom back. She's going to pay her back. She's going to make bank doing animation because she's so good. But
that's funny. No, because I'm the same way. I've not for many years if I had any like gaming in my life. As a kid I played, Nintendo, Mario or whatever, Zelda and all that. But obviously there's a lot of animators who are deep into they're about that life or whatever. And I'm not. And so when Arcane first came out, I was not that familiar with League of Legends or anything. But I heard everyone talking about it. They're like, well, they're so cool, so awesome. I'm like, what is this thing everyone's talking about? And I turned it on and I was like instantly hooked. I'm like, whoa, this is so good. It felt so like fresh and new and different and so high level, and the performance and like the subtle like facial acting and the look of it, like all of it just was like you say, firing on all cylinders. Like every department, you could tell the care and stuff that went into every frame and choice and the film language and all of it was just really impressive. So yeah, good on you and your team. It's really cool.
The passion, man, that's what made it so enjoyable, because I think I've worked at places where animators will get notes and it'll be like, and maybe that's justified sometimes. I'm not saying it's not, the slag of like, oh, more notes, but it was never like that. It was like people were hungry for notes. People were hungry to push it. And it's such a rare thing to be a part of. And it just makes it more enjoyable, when everybody's in it, like, how can we elevate this? And then I did a post on LinkedIn not long ago, but every time 2D effects would start rendering their work on our shots, it was like, it would be like, guys, 2D effects is out. And we'd all like gather around. It was like Christmas, man. It was so exciting. And that's how like, I think every department felt. And when you'd see lighting, you're like, oh my God, look at my shots. So it's a rare thing, man. Super magical. And it's culture.
So what was your role or your title in that? You were a lead or you were a soup, or what was this kind
Yeah,
of structure?
this is the weird thing about this industry is like the same job has different titles, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
so on Ron's Gone Wrong, I was a supervising animator and that was a team lead. And on Arcane, I was a lead animator and that was a team lead. It's like the same
yeah,
job. So
yeah.
yeah, basically, like I said, I don't just do something and then move up too quick. I'm like, I want to make sure I've got this. So I did another 2.5 years on Arcane, and that was just as a team lead, just growing, trying to learn how to like feed the team and nurse the team and make them happy, but elevate their work. There's a lot of, I think, best practices of my favorite leads, my favorite soups, whatever you want to call it, over my career that I'm trying to emulate when I'm doing that job. And it takes practice. It's hard, man. It's not an easy job. I think it's potentially kind of one of the hardest jobs because you're doing high level quota, and you're also managing upwards 5 to 7 people, and so you're casting, you're doing a lot of the stuff that might fall under the Hoka or Anim director, but you're also animating. So you're like this middle
Yeah.
thing that kind of like goes up and down depending on the needs of the production, But it's a hard job. I give shout out to anybody that's a supervising animator for a long time because it's challenging if you're doing it right, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, awesome. I'm sure you were doing it right. And again, the work on the screen speaks for itself. So we're about to transition into Predator. I can tell that
Okay.
we're taking all the steps, but I did want to double back on something because you mentioned before, I guess, that you were teaching at Art Center or wherever you said.
Yeah.
Where in your career did kind of teaching come in, and how did that kind of tie into or affect your sensibilities once you did start leading? Like, did it prepare you in
Oh,
those
that's great.
ways, or is there like parallels?
That's an awesome question, man. Yeah, I think it definitely prepared me to lead because when you teach, you start to think about why you do stuff, right? Animation's kind of instinct driven, I think. But when you have to explain it to somebody, you have to go, wait, why do I do this? Why is it that I do these things? And of course, we have the principles and they've explained it to us, but there's other stuff that you don't always think about. So the first time I started teaching was actually for a school called 3D Sense. It's a school in Singapore, and it was online. And then from there, I did go to Art Center, and I think I was doing those simultaneously while I was still living in LA just to earn some extra cash. But I enjoyed it. I liked it. And then stopped teaching when I moved to London because it was like everything's new. I can't do anything but the job. And then when I went to France, I ended up teaching again while I was leading the team at Artifacts. So just intermittent teaching from here and there. But I really do enjoy it. It's really rewarding, and you use those skills with your team because crews are getting more junior all the time. Like Fortiche is testament to that. Like they're coming out of school, so you can't just take for granted that the whole crew is going to have the experience to know the things that you expect them to know. So I think it's good for the people in charge to have the skills to explain visually, either drawing it or different techniques, to get the notes hit, by somebody that hasn't done it 1,000 times.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's so interesting. I've been around the industry about 20 years or so at this point myself. But the caliber of entry level has just
Oh,
gone
dude.
through the roof from 20 years ago, right? Like
I
used
know.
to if you could work Maya at all, you could probably find work somewhere. And then
It's
now
so
like the
true.
students come out and they're just like, there's so many places teaching animation well, and you
Yeah.
named several right now. It's like you can learn from experienced people in so many different ways now, and so the people coming right out of school are already like, I was sitting in on intern dailies today at work, and they're already like such
You're
high
right.
caliber, but they do lack that experience, right? They don't have
You're
that
right.
on the job like actual experience, and so the leadership and like shepherding that,
Yeah.
I'm sure is its own kind of challenge. You can't take for granted that, like you say, that they know certain things or have done it before,
Yeah.
even if they're extremely talented. So yeah, that's great. I love the parallel of teaching and then kind of finding your way into leadership positions.
You,
Is a nice
I
connection.
just want to say that's an excellent thing you brought up. I remember talking about like post animation mentor when students started being taught by professionals that were doing it every day. There was like this renaissance in animation. You know what I mean? Where everybody, like you just said, like coming out of school, the level that you're hitting just right out of school was we couldn't hit that. We couldn't hit that. I mean, when I was learning animation, we had like maybe Keith Lango had a few tutorials
Yep.
on E-Bombs World. Like there just wasn't wealth. And if you went to like a brick and mortar school, usually that was just the local talent. You know what I mean? It wasn't the caliber. So of course there's like this just surge of, it's like the process got expedited. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What we used to fumble through and kind of, you know, stumble our way through, it was like, let's skip all that. Here it is. This is what you need to do. Boom, boom, boom. And yeah, now, but the thing is the quality of work that we strive to do is always going up too.
Yeah.
So,
the rising tide raises all ships, they say, right?
Oh, I love it.
So we've made it. I believe, right? So you're working, I guess, on season 2. You guys wrapped up season 2, I'm assuming, at Fortiche. And then how do you find yourself to Third Floor? What is the transition?
Okay.
How does Predator come about?
I'm so impressed. You're keeping me moving. I love it, Aaron.
It's episode 18, man. We got a lot in the can at this point.
So I didn't finish season 2. I got to episode 7. And then I had some family issues happen with my parents. And so it was kind of like time to come back. So we packed it up. It was a big sad goodbye, and we came back. And I ended up going back to Dreamworks, the alma mater, right?
Okay.
And it was amazing, like going back to good friends, open arms and all that. And I went back to work on Trolls 3 just as an animator. Because again, moving back, like new city, new everything, and I just wanted the good old like trusty, I know what I'm doing job. So went back as an animator on that. That was a trip, I have to say, going from Arcane to Trolls. Like,
yeah.
I remember talking to Dan Wagner, and he was like, your stuff's looking really good. I go, dude, I am over animating and overthinking everything. Like, I'm like, Poppy's like, let me just really think about all this stuff. And they're like, she just needs to go, you know? And I'm like, oh, okay, I don't see it like that anymore because my brain has been changed by Arcane. But no, it was great. It was awesome. It's a super fun movie. And while I was on that, I got a call from a really good friend of mine from back in the day, Todd Constantine. I worked with his wife for a long time, Elizabeth, at DreamWorks. And anyway, he calls me up and he goes, hey, I know you're back in the States. How married to DreamWorks are you right now? And I was like, what's going on? And he basically said Third Floor's cooking up something that they want to be Arcane style. And when he told me it was the Predator movie, I was just like, oh my God, like those moments where like the sky opens up and like, you know, the universe goes, you are meant to do this, you know, like it was like one of those moments, man, because Predator has always been, is now like one of my favorite movies, the 1987 Predator. It is
awesome,
one of those movies I'll just put on anytime. I did this interview for 3D Sense actually at one point when I went out there, and they were like, what's your favorite movie? This was like 7 years ago, man. And I was like, Predator.
Wow.
And they were like, really? Why? And I'm like, it's just a visually stunning. I was watching it one day and my wife was doing something. She wasn't watching it with me, but she was in the vicinity, and she goes, there's like no dialogue in this movie. It's just machine gun fire and music. And I was like, whoa, you're right. That's awesome. Because it just made it even better to me, right? So anyway, I love that movie so much. I quote it nonstop. And to when he calls me up with the opportunity to be a part of bringing that franchise into animation, I was just like, oh my God, I have to do this. So it was a delicate balance. And I went to DreamWorks and I said, I'm so sorry, I can't tell you what the movie is, but when you find out, you'll understand. But I have this opportunity and I have to say goodbye after Trolls. I finished off Trolls. So I did finish the movie. I went there to do, because it's not good to not do that. Shame on you kids. You always finish what you go there to do. Now, of course, they wanted me to go on to Kung Fu Panda 4 and other things, but I hope they understood. And I hope they especially understand now, because it's the Predator, man. But yeah, so I did that. And then I met with the directors, and the co-director, Josh Wasung, called me up and he pitched the whole thing to me. And I was like, oh my God, this sounds so good. And then he told me the timeline that they were going to do it in. And I got really scared because again, it's moving up to that next level. I want to do a good job. It's really important to me, if I'm going to take something on, to be able to do it well and do it to the caliber that I want to do it at, you know? And when the schedule was laid out to me, I ran the numbers over the weekend, and I was like, there's no way I can ramp up a team and hit the quality of this film in the time that we have. And so I wrote him And I was like, I'm so sorry, but for these reasons, and I listed it all out. I was like, I have to decline. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for the offer and whatever. He calls me, or he texts me, and he goes, I just got your email like 5 minutes after I sent it. And he goes, can I get a few minutes of your time just to talk about your points? And man, when he called me up, he talked to me like a human being. And I know that sounds weird to think that's remarkable, but I've never been talked to that way by like an executive. He's an executive. He runs the company, you know, and he addressed all of my concerns, and he was like, here are our solutions for it. So he said, you're right. We can't ramp up a crew of 80 animators in the time in 2 months to begin, you know, animating this. He goes, we're going to work with partner animation studios. And anyway, he went down my list. And at the end of that phone call, I was like, my wife ended up coming in. She goes, I heard the whole thing. She was like outside the door. And I was like, this is really scary, but I feel like I'd be an idiot not to work for this guy. Like what he's laid out, you know, for me, and the way that he has listened to my concerns and addressed them. I'm like, I got to give this a shot. So I accepted the job, and off we went.
I guess my first question that arose as you were kind of talking through that part of it, how early in the process is this? Like,
Yes.
What is, so I know that Third Floor obviously is known for previs historically. They've not done features prior to this. Like, are there like, at what point does a Hoka come on? Like, are there
Right.
boards? Have they previs anything, or like, how early is this in the process?
I think this was a little bit unusual because when I came on, they didn't have anything. There was no script.
Okay.
There was no, but I think they wanted to make sure they had certain positions lined up for the investors, because I think they had been given the film based on a really cool little short test that they had done. But I think there was still like, there's hoops to jump through, right, for the studio, and they want to know who your key players are, right? So I think that was part of their strategy in bringing me on. But the reality is there was so much to do that I'm glad I came on when I came on. But yeah, there was no script. There were no designs at that time. We didn't have any assets. Oh, wow. So in a very short time, Previs actually got the movie up from nothing to the full movie up in rough previs in 4 months, and then they continued to refine it for another like 3 or so months after that. But it was pretty remarkable how they got it up, and it was all rough assets. It wasn't final designs, but they got a movie up and running in a record time. And during that time, we were having assets trickling in. The majority of people, just their energy stayed up, and they knew they were a part of something special for this, you know, and that's what drove it. You know, we were working with 2 partner companies. We worked with Steamroller Animation, and then I got to work with Fortiche again, man. Like my teams came on. So wow, it was extraordinary. So there's like the familiar, and at Steamroller, one of the anim soups there was Tommy Lufquist. He's an old Dreamworks friend of mine, a really good friend. Of course, Alexi was on this, Remy was on this. The people in the leadership roles at the partner companies were people that I totally trusted. They understood the vision, they understood the quality that I was trying to get, and they just dove in on it. And I'm just so proud of them. You know, I'm so proud of the whole crew.
What how much of this was like, obviously you're working with partner studios, but how much of the Third Floor part of it was remote? Like, was a lot of your team like on the ground on the floor there, or you had people kind of all over the place?
100% remote. 100%.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So we, like I said, we had 2 partner animation companies, and then we built an internal team. And the internal team was all remote, comprised of a lot of Vancouver talent. We did have some people in LA, but dominantly it was Vancouver talent. Like I mentioned, Victor, one of my leads for the internal team, was in Montreal. I had another lead. Another lead from Pixar. Actually, you might know him, Eric Lynn.
Yeah.
Yes.
I know Eric. Yeah.
and then another old colleague of mine from Dreamworks, Sebastian Wuja, was my third lead. And then the animation team was comprised dominantly of Vancouver talent, but there were Mike Stern was on the team.
Yeah, you got Mike Stern, Mark Rivera. I know Maya Tanaka did some. Yeah.
Oh,
got some more guys.
So good. Yeah, man. So it was a tight team, and I got to give the internal team props because nobody knew each other. So Fortiche is right, but they've had, 5 years working together, nurturing the communication. You can just look at somebody and be like, and they go, I understand, right? That's what happens. Steamroller didn't necessarily have that advantage, but they still had more history, and they had a little more time. The internal team came on for the last chapter. They did the arena chapter, and they did it in 4.5 months, something like that. So it was like, hey, nice to meet you. Okay, get to work, and here's the quality that you have to hit. And like I said, everybody just dove in, and I'm so proud of everybody across all the teams. But like, I think the internal team had a lot of challenges, right? Because nobody knew each other. We didn't have history. We didn't have that sort of shorthand in communication. But it all really came together, and I'm so proud of the film.
So is that how the split worked? Was it like by chapter? You did the bullet
That's
and then
exactly
the shield
what I
and,
did.
and yeah, okay, the blade or yeah.
Exactly. And I was fortunate enough to get to choose who did what. So I knew I wanted Sword to be done by Fortiche like early on. As soon as I found out it was Fortiche, I'm like, that's who I want to do this. I know that.
Okay, awesome.
Because I knew that, like Dan Trachtenberg, when he did Prey, it's very important to him to have authenticity for the time period, right? So I knew the Kenjutsu, all of the style of fighting had to be super authentic. And I already had that experience with Fortiche to know that they do their homework. They do their research. I should call them F Company, by the way. It's Fortiche Artists, but they're called F Company for legal reasons with Riot and whatnot. So I've been forgetting to say that. I don't think I'm breaking any laws or anything, but that's what they're credited as. And Steamroller, like I said, I knew Tommy and I trusted him, but for the most part, I didn't know any of the crew. So that particular chapter that I knew the importance of historical, genuine fighting style, I knew that was going to go to F Company, Fortiche, and then Steamroller, because they were bigger and I think more capable of taking on more. They ended up doing 2 chapters. They did Shield and Bullet, and then that just left the Arena chapter. And so we built the internal team to do the Arena chapter.
Awesome. Oh, so I will confess, I'm not. It's not my genre historically. I had not seen any of the old Predator films. I've seen Alien, but not Alien vs Predator, and so Predator is not really part of my lexicon.
You haven't seen Predator?
No.
1? Okay, this is over.
No,
this interview's over.
I know, right? No. But so even preparing for this, obviously, I'm like, I've got to, I'm going to watch this project, but I was not that familiar with the franchise at all. I know the designs and stuff, but then I wasn't. Like, as I was watching it, like, came in completely, like, raw, dropped in, wasn't sure, I had to find time. My wife was not here and my 5-year-old son was not, because it's very, adult, obviously, in that way. A lot of violence, but not a lot of talking, to your earlier point, right? There's not that much script to speak of, really. But I was really, like, impressed. I was blown away, obviously, by the quality, the accuracy, of the combat, all these types of things was just so well done. It was really satisfying to watch. And as I'm watching it, as my animator brain, questions arose about like how all this combat and all this really like all these dynamic shots, like almost every shot is like, a really, really high level kind of combat shot. How much of this was figured out in the previs? How did you have fight choreographers, or like how much of this is like individual animators kind of coming up with the choices? Like I was kind of wondering like what was the process in terms of like getting these really elaborate combat sequences to come together so well?
That's such a great question, man. So basically we did have fight choreographers, but the difference here is that initially I said, okay, I understand the story, and Previs is laying out sort of I call them the gags, but that's probably not the best word, but like they're laying out what happens, right? It's like first there's a standoff, then there's a little of this, then he flings a sword up into the ceiling, and then he swings up and does it. But as far as like the actual mechanics of doing it, it's not specific, right? Of course, it's previs, it's not specific. So I was like, we have to have fight choreographers, and there was some reluctance in the beginning, because I think that sometimes fight choreographers can kind of go, no, that's a dumb idea. Here's what we're gonna do, and that's not how they wanted to make this film. They wanted to make this film where it's very previs driven, right? The ideas are generated by the directors and previs. And so there was a bit of reluctance, but I was like, look, guys, the majority of this film is going to be made by like single people like me in a room by themselves. Like we can't shoot reference one side and then shoot the reference the other side. It's going to look ridiculous. And so they ended up hiring these amazing fight choreographers, Jeremy and Ryu. I don't know their last names, but they worked with John Wick, and they hit it off with Dan. I think Dan had worked with them previously, but they were great because they took the nuggets of ideas that came from previs and they fleshed them out and they embellished them here and there. But like ultimately they just brought to it what we needed in animation, which was like we shot it from multiple angles, and they brought to it the physical mechanics that we needed to observe to really bring it in. And they also brought authenticity. Ryu, he studied Kenjutsu. His dad was one of the original Power Rangers. So that's like his,
That's awesome.
how cool is that, right? So they gave us a lot of tips, like, this is how they would pull a sword, this is how they would hold a sword, this is how they bloodlet, when they clean the sword, and all of this stuff, man. The directors were like eating it up, and Josh would keep bringing it up, like, don't forget that thing that Ryu said that one day, and I was like, yeah, absolutely. So it was really informative to us, and what it did, I think, especially for Fortiche, was it gave them director approved reference, like, from the get-go. So all they had to do then was make it awesome, right? And of course we push things and retime things, but the choices were director approved. So there was no exploration. It was really important to me in this schedule to have animation be an executable department and not an explorative department. I've been at studios where animation, even though they go through storyboards and layout, when it gets to animation, it's still like, hey, let's try some stuff. And I was like, there's no time for that here. So that kind of thing really helped us be executable. And the big oneer scene in the Viking chapter was the same way. It wasn't with Ryu. We ended up using Michael Kiley, an old friend of mine, and he's one of the head of animation. You know Michael Kiley? Cool.
He taught it. I don't know him personally, but he taught it. I animate for a long time.
Yeah, cool.
When I was taking classes over there. Yeah.
So he's a martial artist. I think he does Krav Maga. He's super cool guy. And since he was the head of animation at Steamroller, it just made sense because he's on the payroll. I'm like, would you come down to third floor and shoot fight choreography for this oneer? So for the oneer in particular, we had previs, and it was kind of a rough idea of what happened. Now, no real specific kills, a few like the stab in the foot and stuff like that, but for the most part it was just like she had to kill 70-80 guys from here to here in one shot. So what we did is I sat with Mihal, I'm sorry, I'm saying his name wrong, Mihal, Tommy, who was the soup on that particular sequence, and myself, and we came up with a kill list. We brainstormed, we were like, what about this, what about that, kill list. Then we laid it all out, and then when Mihal came down, he and his partner, they acted out each kill separately. So they were like very contained. Whereas Ryu and Jeremy acted out like a sequence. We isolated each kill, and then we gave that over to Tommy, and Tommy assigned it out and lined up all the data. It was a crazy orchestration of multiple animators with blend points where there'd be an arrow wiped past screen, and that's where we would break it off and go, okay, now this is your chunk. But it all had to come back seamless. But he arranged all that and just brought absolute magic to that oneer, which to my knowledge has not been done in CG animation to that scope. Like, I don't think I've seen oneers. I've done oneers, like on Dragons 3 we had a big oneer, but this was like she killed like 70 guys in one cut. It was insane. So I'm super proud of Tommy for that one, man.
Wow, awesome. Well, so I think you mentioned it before, but what, I guess, across the three studios, like what did the headcount end up being? And you mentioned the tight time schedule, but like, can you speak to how long like it actually took to make this thing with the team that you ramped up to?
Sure. Yeah. So I came on in August 23. That's when I started, when we had nothing. By December, I was doing some early tests with characters. By December, we had some look a picture tests done. And we started at the end of December, we started animating some of the airplane shots because we didn't have the characters ready yet. Yeah. So again, like production was like, well, what can we line up? What can we get started? Let's start animating airplanes without pilots. So we started doing that. That trickled into January. And then it was around mid-January when everything started to really hit. Not that all the assets were ready, but we had assets to really start sequences with people and predators. And that was Steamroller that started. And then I believe Fortiche came on in February, and then we were operating those two studios every day, doing reviews, moving forward in sequences up until the internal team started. I want to say October, man. It's kind of a blur, Aaron, to be honest, but I want to say October, and that's why I say like we had the shortest amount of time. It might have been a little before October, but basically the movie wrapped December 20th. So August 23rd, the end of August 2023 to the end of December 2024. So a year and a half in total, but animation was just under a year for what we did. And it's a crazy complex film, which is why I'm so
It is,
proud.
yeah. Like it's because a lot of like a lot of movies you have like, oh, the big third act fight or whatever. There's like the one big scene, but it's like everything in this was like a big crazy like scene.
Yeah.
And yeah, just so intense and like so much complexity where every shot seemed like the hard shot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I was really impressed by it. I enjoyed it. I'm glad. I'm glad that this led me to go watch it. I don't know that I might have even watched it otherwise, but I was glad that I did. It's a little outside of the wheelhouse, like I say, of my like things I'll usually put on. Just again,
Oh, I get that. Yeah.
But yeah, it's like you have to find some dad time to go watch the gore and all the cutting off heads and whatnot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really enjoyed it. You guys should be very proud of what you put together. Yeah, it was great seeing a lot of names I knew in the credits. And I've had some conversations since then with some of them and let them know, how much I enjoyed
Oh, that's awesome.
because yeah, it was a really cool thing. Well, we're kind of coming towards the end of our time here. But as we wrap up, you mentioned before, that as we've kind of heard all about your journey and you hit certain levels and you kind of stay there a while and make sure you're comfortable and understand the role. Without going into any details, now that you've made it all the way to head of character animation, it sounds like you had a good experience doing it, even though it was truncated schedule. And I'm glad you had good leadership that worked with you and understood your concerns and took them seriously, and you guys were able to pull it off. What's next for Steve? Like what is this the role that you enjoy enough to see yourself continuing to stay in, or are you running back to is it one of the things you're get me out of here, retreating back to just being on the box or what? Yeah. Puppy.
No, so they asked me that at the end. They said, what do you want to do at this point? And I was like, I want to rinse and repeat. I want to learn from things that I can do better, and I want to do this job again and see if I can improve. So that's
Awesome.
what I'm doing now. So on the next project, which I can't talk about, but I can say that it's not a sequel yet. But I'm hoping there will be a sequel to Killer of Killers in our future. But yeah, on this current project, I'm still the head of character animation on this, and yeah, so we'll see. Eventually, I think I'd love to direct. We didn't get into this, but when I was animating at Dreamworks, I did a lot of little short films with friends, not animated, but like live action. And I really enjoy doing that stuff. Like I feel kind of at home. And I feel like eventually I'd like to try my hat in that. And I don't know what the best way to do that is. I was talking with the leadership at Third Floor, and it could be like if we get a television series or something that poses an opportunity to be head of character animation for a season and then possibly move into a directorial role for an episode or two. I know that Bart from Arcane did that, and I really admired that because he ran the ship super well. People loved working for him, and then he was like, now I'd like to try this, but in a small dose, small doses. So we'll see, man. But
because even JP was the episode before this, and he was able to make that transition kind of from Hoka to
Totally.
even directing at some point, which is really cool, or co-directing. But yeah, that's awesome. I always just love to kind of hear, even when people hit these kind of upper echelons, they're always still motivated to keep pushing their craft and still have goals and aspirations, and so that's really inspiring, I think, for the listeners to hear that. Well, Steve, we have run out of time, but we did get to a lot of great stuff. I so appreciate your time. It's a really great conversation. I've enjoyed getting to know you, and hopefully we'll continue, offline to get to know each other more, because this was really great. I'm excited to continue following your career. I know you've got a lot of bright stuff ahead. Thank you all of you listeners for tuning in for this episode. Stay tuned. Be sure to like and subscribe. We've got plenty more great episodes coming as we round out season 2 in the next couple of months. Thank you to all of you. And yes, thank you again, Steve. This was really great. Thanks for being generous with your time and vulnerable with your inspiring story, your journey.
This was so much fun, Aaron. Thank you so much, Aaron. This is so much fun.
I'm glad we did this thing. I'm glad you reached out and we were able to make it happen. So thanks again to all of you, and we'll see you next time here on CG Riff. Bye.